Hi, everybody. My computer just talked to me. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of the Children's Book Insider newsletter, and welcome to the Kidlit Distancing Social. If you are new to us and would like to get on our list and hear about what we do every week as far as our guests, plus all the other stuff that we do, you could go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet. And you will get on our list, and you will also get a free ebook, The Ultimate Children's Writing Cheat Sheet, which compiles 31 years of children's writing knowledge into one free ebook. We are celebrating our 31st year in business. And so we've taken our best beginner tips and put it in this ebook, which is yours for getting on our list and finding out everything else cool that we're doing. And if you are interested in subscribing to our newsletter, Children's Book Insider, which is our flagship product that started 31 years ago this month. Well, we're still in May. This is the beginning of our 31st year. Writeforkids.org/CBI, and we have a special $5 a month offer for our socialites. You'll get a monthly newsletter emailed to you every month, about 20 pages, has market info on where you can submit. It has articles on the craft of writing. It has interviews with agents, editors, authors, illustrators, and one special above the slush pile code every month that is given to us by either an editor or an agent that allows you to jump over the slush pile with your submission, and access to our CBI Clubhouse online database of 31 years worth of information. So there you go for $5 a month. Now we get to celebrate you. Yay! I have 3 great celebrates this week. We've had a lot of good celebrates the last few weeks, which makes me very happy. So Regina Coates, writing under the pen name R.K. Coates, has just self-published a picture book, One Wink, illustrated by Abigail Gurdon. And it's the story of an 8-year-old Emma who found a way to spread kindness and make new friends during the pandemic. So congratulations, Regina. Deborah Doherty signed a contract with Young Dragons Press for 3 picture books with release dates starting in 2023. So congrats, Deborah. That's awesome. And for those of you who are new to publishing and you go, oh my gosh, she has to wait 2 years, that's normal with picture books because they have to contract the illustrator. The illustrator has to create all the artwork. The book has to get printed. It's a long process. So patience is a virtue with children's book writing. And Nadia Solomon's debut picture book, Good Night Ganesha, illustrated by Poonam Mistry, and I hope I'm saying these names correctly, will be published by Philomel Books on August 31st. And it's a gentle bedtime story featuring 2 children sleeping over at their grandparents' home in India and the various ways their culture plays a role in their nighttime routine. And it is a gorgeous book. So I'm very excited about that. Congratulations, Nadia. We're really looking forward to that one. So I want to hear your good news. You can email me, mail@writeforkids.org, and put celebrate in the subject line. And we will feature your news on a future Kidlit Distancing Social. And no celebration is too small. It does not have to be a publishing contract or a book coming out. If you found a critique group that you're excited about, we want to hear about it. So anything you want to celebrate, we will help you with that. Okay, here's a link of interest. I always share something interesting that I found writing related during the week. How to Build Your Author Website by Clayton Noblet on the Written Word Media blog takes you step by step through how to create your author website and what it should include. So this is a really in-depth article. He recommends different website platforms you could use and sort of talks about the ones he likes. He talks about the kinds of things that should be on your website. So that is a really, really informative article for those of you who are building a website. I created a direct link to this, bit.ly/build author website. And Lori, I can't put it in the chat because this is a slide and it's not, I can't copy and paste into the chat box. However, when you get the replay tomorrow, John always puts the links right under the replay of anything that we talk about. So this link will be right under the replay tomorrow. So bit.ly/build author website. Hi, Catherine. Okay, now we get to meet my awesome guest. Shannon Anderson taught for 25 years from first grade up through college level and has recently quit her day job to become a full-time writer. The highlight of her teaching career was being named one of the top 10 teachers who inspired the Today Show. She's also an award-winning children's book author of 14 books with more on the way, including, this sounds very cool, a spring 2022 book from Feeding Minds Press called I Love Strawberries, which is a diary format picture book, which I think is really interesting, about a girl who's growing her own strawberries, and it contains facts and follows the growing season of the strawberries. So that sounds really cool. And I read that Emma Dryden will be her editor, I think. Shannon, I want to confirm that with you. But Emma is one of our favorite people here at The Social, so I think that would be amazing. She's former regional advisor for the Indiana SCBWI and was named the J.C. Runyon Person of the Year for her writing and speaking on social and emotional topics. And she loves doing author visits and keynotes. And I want to show you one more slide, and then Shannon, you're going to come on. Clearly, she was an amazing teacher, and we're going to talk a little more about this. But this is just a couple pictures from her website. One of the things she did every year with her class is she had them write a book, write and illustrate a picture book. And at the end of the year, she had the characters the kids created turned into stuffed animals and gave them to the kids. Is that not amazing? And she had the kids draw their characters on her dress. And then this past year, because it was the pandemic and they were all virtual, she hand delivered these stuffed animals to each of her students. Is that not amazing? How could you not love a teacher like that? So Shannon, come on with me. I'm excited to talk to you. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There you are. Hi. So everyone is just, astounded at how wonderful that project was as a teacher with your kids. I bet that was so much fun every year, and that you got so much out of it.
It was hands down my favorite day of the school year every year. And I now have a collection of these wonderful dresses.
That is so awesome. What a great idea.
Beautiful.
They are.
So, yeah, they would draw their characters, of course, to write their books. And then I would send them off to a company that would make them into stuffed animals. And that was always the highlight when they got those stuffed animals. And I would have a big reveal party where they were in a box. I'd call them up one at a time. And I'd worked on them, their books with them for over a month. So I knew every character and which kid it belonged to. And so it was just so much fun. If you want to look on the video and see the reactions, it's priceless. It's on shannonisteaching.com. If you go on there, I don't remember which tab it's under, but if you want to see, just awesome.
Yes.
But yeah, I even now that I'm not in the classroom, started doing with homeschool kids. I've had parents asking me if I will do this book project with them. And it just so happens tomorrow is our reveal day. So since I knew you had mentioned you were going to say this, I have a show and tell for you. So yeah, so this is what the books look like. They're nice hardcover books. And now that I'm not at school, I don't have as many grant opportunities because I'm not considered a public school teacher at a Title I school. And so I found a local seamstress, and she made the stuffed animals that go with the books, and she did an awesome job. And I mean, look at this. So here's this little narwhal book, and she
Gosh,
made this narwhal.
that is,
I
oh,
mean, I
I
just
love it.
cannot wait for the kids to come here tomorrow and to get to have the reveal with them after all of their hard work, because it is a lot of hard work. As you know, if you're a writer, imagine being, someone first through fifth grade writing a whole book on your own. It's a lot. So yes,
Yes.
it's a great culmination project.
Oh, how wonderful. And they are going to treasure that stuffed animal for the rest of their lives. I would still have mine if you had been my teacher. So,
Yeah, well, I've
yeah.
taught long enough that I go to their graduation open houses and they have, the book out there on their table proudly with all their trophies, and it just, oh,
Oh,
that's wonderful.
that's so great. That's so great. So, you recently quit your full-time teaching job. So, how hard was that to walk away from teaching? Clearly, you loved it and become a full-time writer.
It was so hard.
Mhm,
I prayed and prayed and prayed about it. I didn't know, if the timing was right and if, we were going to be able to afford it. Let's be real.
mhm,
My husband's a police officer. I'm a teacher. We make roughly the same amount. And so it was going to cut our income in half.
mm.
And I have two daughters, one that just graduated from college last weekend
Huh.
and then just got married. Well, she graduated 2 weekends ago and got married Saturday. She's on her
Mhm.
honeymoon right now. And so knowing, I have college to pay for and a wedding, and then my other daughter's a junior, we're going to have her college to pay for. It's very scary. But not only that, I love teaching. I absolutely love being in the classroom. And
Mhm.
it just got to the point, though, the last 10 years, I had been writing books. And I just had this pull
Yeah.
to be able to do more author visits and to be able, I was doing a lot of professional development for teachers, like how to make writing exciting in your classroom. And as
Mhm.
I shared with you, I do a lot of social and emotional topics. So now I'm getting asked to do lots of social and emotional learning lessons for schools, and
Mhm.
I enjoy doing that as well. I have two books on growth mindset and another one coming out. I just signed a contract last week for a book called Yay, You Failed. And so I really love to push teachers to teach growth mindset and to help
Mhm.
kids understand what that is and how powerful it is to believe in yourself and to learn from your mistakes and to keep going. And that's something I love to talk about in author visits is, I show them all my rejection letters and I say, if
Yeah.
I had just given up after those first couple rejection letters, I would have never, had all of these books published. And I share stories of different things that happened along the way. And it
Mhm.
just really, it's inspiring. Knowing Dr. Seuss was rejected 27 times helps
Right.
me know it's part of the process.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I had already started writing, I had already started presenting. And, as you said, I was the Indiana RA for SCBWI. I was doing a lot at writing conferences and things. And I just, felt like, I taught for 25 years and I'd still be teaching. It would just take different forms. And
Right.
so I kind of did a test drive and I took a sabbatical leave so that
Mhm.
I could see, what would it be like without my income for a year? And what
Yeah.
would it be like to, well, I took my sabbatical. I requested it in January, not knowing there was going to be a global pandemic. And
Huh.
so
Huh.
part of what I was trying to test is if I would love traveling all over the place for a whole year, but obviously
Oh,
that didn't happen.
yeah.
But I did get to do a lot of virtual speaking.
Mhm.
And honestly, I think I probably spoke at more conferences, especially like gifted conferences and places I could speak about social and emotional learning and writing for kids than if I would have gone in person, because there were some weeks that I would have three conferences in three different states in the same week. And, I wouldn't have been able to do that if it were in person. So,
Yeah.
there were some hidden blessings in there with the having to be
Mhm.
online, but I cannot wait to finally get back in person.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So we have a lot of teachers who are subscribers to our newsletter and who are aspiring writers. Do you think that teaching prepared you for writing in any way? And if so, how do you think that?
I think in a lot of ways, because for one, you're immersed in your audience all the
Mhm.
time. And
Mhm.
one of my favorite things to do is read aloud time. And
Yeah.
then just hearing the reactions, and I just enjoy reading the stories to them. It really gives you a feel for what they like, what they think is funny, what they think is kind of boring,
Mhm.
and just paying attention to what they're reading, like on self-selected reading time.
Right.
About any grade level that you teach, like for third grade, we had a half an hour every day that they were selecting their own books to read. And,
Mhm.
I would notice those things. What are the books that are being neglected, and what are the books that are really popular? And, you conference with the kids and they tell you why they like the book or don't like the book. And anytime I had a new manuscript coming, I beta tested it on them, of course.
Mhm.
And they felt very special and privileged to get to be the first, people to hear the book. But it really was for me, because I wanted to know, are they laughing in the right places, or does it make sense, or are they confused? And
Mhm.
so in those ways it helped me, but also in some of the things I'm doing now as far as leading writing workshops for kids, you know teaching writing every day in the classroom helped with that, to
Right.
hone that craft and to get them to be more creative and take more risks with
Mhm.
their words.
Yeah. I know that, when you're writing, especially for kids on the younger end, it's really important to not write down to your readers and to be able to get into their mindset and see the world the way they see it
Mhm.
so that they don't feel judged, um, by the author. They feel accepted. Do you think because you've been around kids for so long that it's easier for you to kind of slip into that worldview? And if so, how do you have any tips for people who might not be around kids all day that they might be able to do that?
Yeah, I think it does help when you can be around kids, and if there's any way that you can beta test on some kids,
Sure.
that's wonderful. I mean, there are all kinds of things like, let's see, there's the whole book of words, like the
Oh,
writer's word book, some of those types of books that you can get into that help you simplify words if you need
mhm,
to make sure that they can understand it. But then also, like you said, you don't want to, dumb it down, as you say,
mhm,
because you don't want to insult your readers, because they understand a lot more than you give them credit for.
right.
And things they don't, they're going to pick up in the context of the story. And
Mhm,
if they don't, then that's a great point, of intervention, where you can have a teachable moment, or you can have a
mhm,
little talk about that thing that they're confused about. And sometimes those lead to great little discoveries.
right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So when you decided you were ready to write full time, were there certain parameters that, you said, I have to hit this many books in print, or I have to know I'm going to make this much in royalties each year, or whatever, before you could take that plunge? Or did you just kind of feel ready?
Well, there were some things, because I'm not much of a risk taker,
Mm,
honestly, in some things, but not with money. And so I'm one of those that I'm very conservative with my investments and things. But I wanted to make sure our house was paid off, our vehicles were paid off, that we were going to be in good shape to pay for our first daughter's, college, and on the way for the second one. And so I made sure that, we were taken care of before I just,
mhm.
often said, okay, well, we're going to now live on just your salary.
Yeah.
But then I made this whole list of, these are possible income streams.
Mhm.
And so I wrote down those things, like I have 14 books out right now. And I knew that this past year that I was on sabbatical, that I had 5 more books coming out. And so, not that the books make a lot of money, because they don't,
Mhm.
but speaking engagements and author visits. And, if I was desperate and I wanted to, and just to be able to see the kids, I could substitute teach. And I did some online teaching. And
Mhm.
you have to be careful, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself with so many of the little things just to make some income that you're not actually writing. And
Yeah.
so I can talk a little bit about that later too. But yeah, I just made sure I was really careful with financially, using that year sabbatical as a test drive, and really taking an audit of, okay, so what do we really need and what do we not need? And how can we make sure that we're in a place
Mhm.
where it's safe to do this without feeling like we're missing out on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and I think that's you raise some really good points because if your goal is to be a career author, write full time, you have to know that your income is going to come from more than your books.
Right.
Um, and or once you've got 50 books in print, you might be able to rely on the income from your books. But I interviewed Jane Yolen, I think like the second or third year of my newsletter. So this was almost 30 years ago. And at that point, she just published, I think, her 400th book a few months ago. But at that point, she had published about 65 books, which is still astounding.
Yeah.
But she told me, she said, now I'm finally able to live off my writing. And I was like, whoa, you know, she was very honest. But of course, we're also dealing in children's books, which tend to stay in print longer than adult books,
Mhm.
but you're making the money in smaller bits over the long haul than with adult books that have these big advances and then they go out of print in 6 months. So that is just a reality if you want to be a career author. But like you said, then you realize there were other income streams which are just as valuable and still feed your creativity, keep you connected with your audience, can be a lot of fun. And so to know that going in is as if you, I'm saying for anybody listening who wants to be a career author, it's not just I'm going to sit and write all day and that's all I'm going to have to do. And what about marketing? I mean, how involved are you in just the basic promotional efforts for your books?
Well, I do quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I do the social media thing, and I have a website, and I love to do something big for my book launch parties. And since I am a local teacher, I get a lot of people coming to my
Mm-hmm.
local book launch events and things. But yeah, you can't depend on the marketing budget at your publisher or things like that. You really do need to reach out and be doing a lot of those things on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of why I do a lot of the speaking on the social and emotional topics. It's not just because I care about those things, which I do. I mean, most of those books came out of real life experiences from my classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Penelope Perfect was a student in my room. She was
Yeah.
her name wasn't Penelope, but she was someone who would just cry if she missed one math problem or one spelling
Mm-hmm.
word or, anything that she felt like she should have done perfectly. She
Mm-hmm.
would just be so hard on herself. And, the books about growth mindset are, of course, examples from my classroom where I would see kids that would give up so easily and slip
Mm-hmm.
into a fixed mindset and just feel like, I'm just not a math person. That's
Yeah.
just not my thing. And it's like, no, 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 we all can learn this thing. It's just we all have different levels of experience going into it. So you just may need more time or more practice on that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Coasting Casey is about an underachiever. And I wanted to be able to share, some of our kids might be Casey is very talented in writing, or I'm sorry, art and music,
Uh-huh.
and not so much interested in the academic areas. And so I wanted to show that because I have a lot of students that are like that, that might get in trouble for
Yes.
doodling instead of paying attention during a lesson or something. So
Mm-hmm.
um, being able to speak about those topics then is a way to get kids or to get parents and teachers interested in the books themselves, because marketing is all about letting the world know your book exists,
Mm-hmm.
because you can write this book and it can end up on Amazon, but unless someone's searching for it,
Sure.
or unless a recommended book, how do people even know that you wrote it?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to figure out ways that the people that might want your book can see that you have that book available. And so that's, where we all are trying to figure out, like, how can I let people know I have this book on shyness and social
Sure.
anxiety? And, so it can be through, I've taught book studies online.
Mm-hmm.
So through an online school platform, I have hosted book studies on Mindset Power, which is a chapter book on growth mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
I would meet with the kids from all over the world. I had kids from England and Canada and Mexico, all different places, and they would all have a copy of the book. And every week we would meet for 8 weeks to talk about that chapter. And that was awesome, not only, to get to do that, but to hear the input from the kids and how
Mhm.
they understood that chapter to be and
Yeah,
how it applied to their lives. So
right.
those are ways that I was just letting people know that book exists and, let's talk about
Mhm.
it.
That's yeah, and that's really smart the way you did that. And a lot of authors feel kind of icky about marketing, like they're used car salesmen, they're hawking like, or they're embarrassed to tell people about their book. And I always tell them, first of all, you're all it is connecting with your readers. You are not some greasy salesman. You are connecting with your audience, which is just an extension of your writing. And if you wrote this book thinking it would improve their lives in some way, either entertain them or help them learn something, and then you don't tell them about it, aren't you doing your audience a disservice?
Right.
So it's you should be proud to talk about it, and it sounds like you are. And I think you're really smart too, like with your picture books, you did a lot of reaching out to the adults because they're the ones buying the books for the younger crowd, and that's really what you have to do often with if you're a picture book writer. And I noticed on your website you've been on lots of podcasts,
Mhm.
um, and just other kinds of media, and I imagine talking about topics that are related to your books, but
Mhm.
then you get to mention your books within that context, and the adults are listening and they go, oh, my kid could really use that book.
Yeah.
uh, so it's smart, yeah. And like I said, it's just connecting with your readers on different ways. So that's great. Are there certain mindset attributes that you think career authors need to become successful? Certain attitudes, certain ways of thinking about what they're doing?
Well, I mean, of course, growth mindset, but
Sure.
but as far as, it's funny that you say that because I just created a free course called Mindset for Makers.
Huh.
And this is one thing that I have done because of being a maker and trying to get in the right mindset because it's a whole new ball game being available during the day and not teaching during the day, and then having, to create a schedule that keeps
Mhm.
me productive and that keeps me doing the right things but also not going too overboard. Because when you don't have, like certain working hours, not that I ever stayed at those when I was teaching, I always came in early and left late, but it's even worse now that I don't have like certain hours or
Right.
certain days that I'm supposed to work. Because, my daughter the other day said, Mom, you work like 17 hours a day now. And I was like, well, but some of it, I mean, doesn't feel, well, a lot of it doesn't feel like work because I absolutely love it. So what I tried to create in this Mindset for Makers class is to kind of teach other people that are trying to do some kind of creative endeavor. It might not even just be writing. It could be, some kind of artistic endeavor, or maybe it's woodworking, whatever that might be for you. But trying to figure out, what does that look like and how do you honor that space?
Hmm.
Because I know for this is good and this is bad. Okay. So when you clear yourself and you announce to the world that you are now this thing. So, when I announced that I am now writing and speaking full time, I knew that that was going to open some opportunities that I didn't know about, that I wasn't even aware of, that weren't on my radar. And I wanted to make sure that I was open and welcome to see what those were, but I also had to be really careful because there are a lot of things that come along that aren't necessarily part of your path. And
Right.
it's really easy to get sucked into those, really
Mhm.
easy. And it's not that they're bad things, it's just that, again, if you get caught up in too many of the little things, it can really prevent you from reaching your goals. So, have you ever heard of Ikigai?
Ikigai. I don't think so.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So, Ikigai is a Japanese saying.
Uh-huh.
And what it is it's like the convergence of four things. Okay. So, what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs,
Mhm.
and oh, what is the other one? What the world needs and what you love. Okay, so that's really important. It has to be something that you love to do.
Mhm.
You're good at it also. You can be valued for it. In other words, paid, and the world needs it. So think about that. Think about all of the different things in your life that you have done because you love it, but you're not necessarily great at it. Like
Right.
singing in the shower, love doing it, but I would never sing publicly because I'm not good at it.
Right.
And there are things that we might do that we love and we're good at, but we don't get paid for it. Unfortunately, a lot of creative artistic endeavors end up that way.
Sure.
So we have to figure out, what is your ikigai? And so I get really nerdy about this. I actually made my own like ikigai post-it note thing. So I've
Oh,
got, this is how you spell ikigai. If you want to look it up, it's Ikigai. I recommend watching some of the YouTube videos on it. Really, it's pretty cool. And so then what I did was I made like this stacks and stacks of post-it notes that I wrote, okay, all these things that I really want to do, that I really want to accomplish. And, some of them were very specific and some of them were, bigger goals. And then I tried to hone in on what are the real ikigai ones, the ones I get paid for, that I'm good at, that I love to do, the world needs. And so those ended up becoming like the top row. So
uh-huh.
for example, one of mine was, my very favorite thing to do is author visits, like hands down, love it.
Mm.
Because I get to connect with kids. I love inspiring kids to see the power of reading and writing. I love teaching them a little about growth mindset while I'm there. And so one of my goals for this coming year is 50 paid author visits. Okay. So then I was able to go from that to, well, then what does that look like if I break that down? And so then I broke it down into, well, so that's roughly one a week, which is actually maybe even more than that because we don't go to school 52 weeks a year. We have summer breaks.
Mhm.
And so then I went into, well, gosh, to contact 50 schools seems overwhelming. And so what would my next step be? And then I thought about, well, goodness, I could just contact one school a day, right? That's not
Right.
very overwhelming. And then,
Mhm.
well, what would my step be before I can do that? And then I thought about, oh, I need to figure out, what is my pitch? What is my, what is the basic part of the email? I mean, you want to personalize, of course, the beginning, just like in a query or a cover letter, but
Mhm.
I would need to create that. And then I thought about, okay, so then what else do I need to do? Well, I have to figure out, who am I contacting? And
Right.
so making lists of people that are, my friends and family that have kids that are in elementary school. So I have that connection point, that little bit of networking. Hey, I know so and so goes to your school. I'd love to come and do a visit if you welcome authors, those types of things. So that's just one example, the paid author visits. And I did some other ones on here that I want to make sure that I do. For example, I teach writing for aspiring writers, and I teach writing to teachers, and I teach writing to kids. And so I have those things. But what I did though, after doing all of that, I use this board to kind of help me stay in check
Mhm.
because, it's funny, after I created this board, I had this opportunity showed up on social media and it said, have you taught elementary school? And I'm like, yes. And do you love writing for kids? Yes. And then it said, if you would like to get paid for doing that and have blah, blah, blah. I mean, like everything was like, check, check, check. Yes. And then what it ended up being was being a passage writer for someone who was selling comprehension things on Teachers Pay Teachers.
Okay.
Well, then when you really look at that, is that on my ikigai? Do I
Mhm.
want to be a passage writer to help someone else make money on their Teacher Pay Teacher store? Not really, right? And
Mhm.
so it helped me to weed that out, because even though I was qualified, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something, even if you're
Exactly.
really good at it. I mean, I could knock those passages out, but I don't want to get wrapped up in writing passages for someone else to sell for their product when I could be creating books that I can do so much more with. And I had an editor of a publishing company that I actually would love to be published in, that contacted me and talked to me for an hour and a half and said, I ended up she asked me to present for her on one of her summits. And she said, ever since I saw you present, I've wanted you on my team. I just haven't figured out how I can get you on my team. And I said, oh, talk to me more. Well, what it ended up being is, she basically wanted me to be her virtual assistant.
Hmm.
And as much as I would have loved to be a part of the team there, that wasn't part of my Ikigai. You know, I
Right.
didn't want to be a virtual. I mean, I'm hiring a virtual assistant right now. I don't want to be someone else's virtual assistant.
Uh-huh.
So even though I'm perfectly capable and I could have come up with content for her, I
Hmm.
just, I had to turn it down, and that was really hard to do. And
I
so it's
bet.
not an
Yeah.
easy thing, but
Mhm.
I feel like you can have that mindset for makers if you get your focus going and you figure out, well, what is it I want to accomplish? And what is it that fits in those categories for me so that I
Mhm.
can reach my goals?
Mhm.
So I don't know if that answered your question,
That's
but
awesome. That is really great. I love this Ikigai concept. And it does it makes you focus on those things that are the intersection of what you love, what you could get paid for, what you're good at. And that is so important. And being able to say no to things that don't fit that is so it's hard to do, especially when you are this is the way you are making your money and you say, I'm turning down a paid opportunity, but if it doesn't fit your overall vision for who you need to be and what will ultimately bring you the most joy, and that's really what's going to lead you to the most success is
Mhm.
that intersection. So that's really, really great. And you know, there's a lot of entrepreneur, you know, if you read books on being an entrepreneur and stuff, there's sort of a conventional wisdom that says 80% of your income should come from 20% of your effort. And if you are chasing after all these small opportunities, like you were saying, you're going to be expending a lot more effort and not really making much more money in the long run. So I
Mhm.
think you're really smart, but I love that Ikigai. So I want everybody to check that out, and we're gonna hear about this in the chat next week. See if any of you have made your own Ikigai board.
Yeah.
That is just so great. I love it. I love it. Um, you talked a little bit about, you know, now you're working 17-hour days and that kind of thing, but it doesn't feel like work, which is great. Do you have do you have certain structure to your day? Do you manage your time a certain way? Do you do certain tasks in the morning, certain in the afternoon, anything like that?
I do. And I should have brought it in here with me. I actually made, there's a company called Zazzle. I don't know if you're familiar with it, that makes
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of personalized stuff. Well, I created, they have these giant Post-it note pads, and I created my own. I am such a to-do lister. I'm also a to-don't lister. But but what I did was I created for myself what I needed on my to-do list. And so on the left-hand side, I made my need to-dos. And I put these nice little check boxes because it's so satisfying to check those off, you know, when you get those done.
Sure.
But then I also on the right hand side put what I want to do, and I make sure that I get those need to do's done first before I get to go to the want to do. And it's
Mhm.
funny because, you know, it might even be something like go out and work in the yard, like pulling weeds or something is on the want to do list, and you're like, you want to do that? I'm like, well, I do. You know, I like being
I
outside,
like
and
being
you know,
outside. I know. I have
but I'm not going to
satisfaction from
use
those
it
things.
as a procrastination technique and do that
Right.
before I don't, you know, I have my need to do's. But you know what's interesting is I had made this Zazzle Post-it note thing last year. And when I was redoing, I finally ran out of Post-it notes because I had ordered pads and pads of it. And when I finally ran out of Post-it notes and I was redesigning it and had the chance to repersonalize it, I realized that I didn't have, like, I had a box on there for, I have a couple of Facebook groups. I have a growth mindset group and a D2Day group that's all about kindness. And so I would have like a little box there, you know, ideas that I could post on there because I post on there daily. And then I would have, you know, like how much water I'm drinking because that's something I'm terrible about, drinking enough water.
Right.
And what I didn't have on there is what are you going to be writing on that
Ah,
day? Like,
yeah.
and so, you know, even though there might be specific things on the need to do list, like I didn't have a separate box there like
Hmm.
you should do this for writing today, you know, if there isn't something specific, you know, that's on deadline or whatever. And so I
Hmm.
added that. But here's the thing that I want to point out about this need to do list. Okay, so this is really important and was a game changer for me. the night before I make that. And I look at that when I'm making the need to do side, I'm very intentional about looking at what I have written there and thinking hard about, okay, now, Shannon, are you going to feel like you were productive and that you got everything done that you needed to reasonably if you finish the need to do side tomorrow? And I
Mhm.
have to be really honest with myself. And if I can tell myself that honestly, yes, if I did all 5 of those things, I would feel like I really got a lot accomplished, then that makes me feel so much better the next day when I get to those 5 things and I get that last thing checked
Oh,
off,
yeah.
because I remembered the day before saying, you would feel like you accomplished something. And I know this sounds so silly that I have to do this, but if I don't do that, then when I get that 5th box checked off, I feel like I still need to keep doing more. And
Right.
so I have to remind myself, no, you said that was a lot to do and you got it all done. And that has freed me to have guilt free time in the evenings. So if
Mhm.
I want to play a game with my family, or if I want to take my dog for a walk, or whatever it is I want to do, I don't feel like I'm taking away from my writing or my work because I got done what I set out to do and I can feel good about that. And
Mhm.
that was something that I really struggled with before. And so it's important for me anyway to make that list and to really believe, that that is a good list, that
Mhm.
is a lot to do. And if I get it done, then that evening is mine and I can do whatever I want on my want to do list, or skip all those if I want to and relax or go to bed early,
Yeah.
whatever. But that was really a game changer for me.
I love that. I'm going to start doing that because I am great at writing to-do lists that go on and on and on, and they're way too much for one day. And then
Yes.
you feel like a failure because you haven't finished the list.
Yes. See, that's what I used to do. I used to have this ongoing list. And what I would do when I would cross something off, it wasn't even very satisfying because it was one thing out of 50 things. And I would keep adding to this
Yes.
list. So it was never ending. But if
Mhm.
you do it on the daily, then you feel like you got something accomplished and it doesn't
Right.
feel like all of these things are hanging over your head. Because as you know, on that list of 50, those aren't things that all have to be done right now. Those are
No,
all things you'd like to get done in the next month or so
no,
total.
no.
But
Yeah,
yeah, if you do
exactly.
it daily, I feel like I get so much more done off of that list because I narrowed it down. I'm more focused. And
Mhm.
where your focus goes, your energy flows, and it just works
Absolutely.
out that way.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a great tip. I'm going to try that. I want you all to try it
Yeah.
too. We'll report back to each other in a couple weeks and see how this is working. This is wonderful. Before we get to some questions, and by the way, any of you who still have questions for Shannon, please remember to put them in the Q&A. Uh, you have pretty much I I don't know if you meant for it to be a cohesive author brand, but you tend to write a lot about this social emotional learning topics and things like that. Do you think it's important, if you want to make your living as a writer, that you have this sort of identifiable personality as a writer, that people know she writes these kind of books? If we want someone to speak on that topic, we're going to book Shannon. Do you think that helps as a career author?
Yeah, and it's funny, I didn't start out that way. I started
Mm-hmm.
very much the opposite on purpose because I knew the teacher in me. I've always lived by Maya Angelou's, when you get, give, and when you learn, teach. I have always been that way. When I learn something, I am already trying to figure out how to translate that in a way I can teach it to someone else, even as I'm learning it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I knew as I was starting to write books that I was going to want to help other writers because I just naturally like to help people along the process of something new I'm learning. And so I wanted to have a big variety. So when I first started out, I had a book. My very first book it's out of print now, but it was about my daughter who had to wear an eye patch for 3 years. And it was called I Am Not a Pirate. And so I wrote that one, which I guess it really kind of is social and emotional, in the sense that, she was feeling very worried about
Yeah.
how people would take that. But then I wrote Nick and Chuggets, which is a book full of spoonerisms. And then I wrote Maggot Man, which is a book about forensic entomology. And that was in middle grade. And, I wrote some picture books, and then I have like this Benjamin Franklin biography, so it may look like I have a lot of cohesive things, but I was intentionally trying to take on different projects because I wanted to be able to help people in different ways. As a matter of fact, the whole reason I took that Benjamin Franklin book was someone reached out to me in the education market for work for hire and said, would you be interested? We saw your website. We see you are a teacher and you also are an author, and we would love to have you write this book. Would you be interested in doing a work for hire? And I saw the rest of that biography series and it was beautiful. Oh my goodness. And so I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. But in the back of my mind, the funny thing is, the big reason I wanted to do it was to experience work for hire. So if I had other people ask me about work for hire, I could talk from experience on how that's going. And, I actually just took on another work for hire and I'm currently doing it. I have another deadline tomorrow for my next 2 chapters, but it's a book about Valentine's Day. And so those, you don't get to pick the topic, but you can turn down if they ask you something.
Sure.
Like one time they asked me if I wanted to write this thing on world history, and it was this huge book. And I'm like, no, I'm not your girl for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's helpful when you do have a niche of some kind, because since I have so many books on social and emotional topics, I am asked to, like, I was invited to speak at the National Gifted Conference this year on growth mindset because of all my growth mindset work. And that's wonderful, because if someone knows you for that and you're getting the invites, that's less time you're spending on trying to ask people if you can speak, at their events. And so it's nice when they naturally see and recognize you as an expert in some field because they see you've researched and done some work on that and you've written about that. And, especially if you, in your marketing, you're doing extension activities and outreach with those. So I think it can be super helpful when you're able to find an area that you kind of shine in and that others can see that and then use you as a resource for that.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to mention, you talked about work for hire, and that's another thing. If you're making a living as a writer, often you take these jobs because it is money and it's pretty quick money. There's a quick turnaround on these books. Excuse me. And it connects you with another publisher, another set of editors. It's all good, then other jobs may come to you. And so, again, for those of you who are dreaming of eventually being a full-time writer, these are the kinds of things you have to be open to. Also, writing for magazines is another one. I know a lot of full-time authors who do quite a bit of magazine writing as well as writing their books. So just being open to, but again, it's got to be something that you want to do for whatever reason, that it still fits your Ikigai. Is that how you say it again?
Ikigai.
Ikigai.
Yeah,
Ikigai. I wrote it down.
I looked up the pronunciation because I wasn't sure how to pronounce it either.
I love this. Ikigai. I'm writing this down phonetically, so I say it right. Ikigai. It's got to fit that. So I'm going to get to a few questions here, but can you hold up your board one more time?
Sure.
People have asked if they could see it again.
Yeah. So yeah, I just kind of
Excellent.
put things that are my big, like one of mine. I not only took the risk of leaving teaching, but then I also left my agent.
Wow.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
The reason was because he was working part-time as an agent, and I felt like if I'm working full-time, I need someone who's also working full-time.
Absolutely.
So so that is on my board as a priority. I need to get an agent. And but yeah, I just kind of put on the top here my biggest priorities, and then under those, like for instance, I want to write a whole picture book series, and so I need to build a strong character. I need to study picture book mentor texts, and all of those. So I just kind of started thinking, well, to do that, what do I need to do? Well, to do that, what do I need to do? And if you guys, I seriously, it's a free little mini class if you want to. I cover that whole thing if you want to have that a little bit in more depth. And I talk about the whole to-do list thing too on there. So just go there to shannonisteaching.com. I think it's under the workshop tab. But if you click on there, it's going to tell you, if you want to look at some of I offer classes for picture book writers. And as a matter of fact, the pre-launch just started. And so it's $50 off right now. If you want, I have 4 different classes. Another one is your next steps for your story once you've written it. How do you submit? The next one is marketing and platform and book launches. Oh my. And
Hmm,
then the last one is how to do author visits, which is my favorite thing. So, but
great.
there's the free one on there is that, and it's available now. So you don't have to wait
Excellent.
until the actual launch in June.
Okay, terrific. Well, we'll definitely have that information with the replay as well. So that's great. That's great. Okay, let me get to a few questions here. Have you ever self-published? Um, and Jessica's asking, she's taught for 19 years and I'm taking a leave next year to work on self-publishing my first book. Is that something you ever considered?
I won't say I've never considered it, but my books are, well, so when I very first started writing, so that book I told you about, I'm Not a Pirate, was a hybrid publisher. However, they marketed themselves as a traditional publisher. And so that kind of got, it's one of the things I talk about in my picture book class, some of the mistakes I made along the way and not recognizing the signs. And the reason that book is out of print now is because those publishers are now in jail. Yeah. So you have to be
Gosh.
very careful
Yeah.
with, different publishing endeavors that sound too good to be true. I mean, it turned out to be fine because I had this book. It wasn't as great a quality as my traditionally published books. They they outsource an illustrator. I didn't have any say in any of that.
Mhm.
So it wasn't a super experience, but at the same time, it was a heart book for me. I wanted to do it for my daughter. And every Amblyopia Awareness Month in August, I sent 100 books to kids who had to wear eye patches. And so
Oh.
for me, it was something I just wanted to do. So
Mhm.
it wasn't a moneymaker. I was teaching full time still. It really was a heart project for me. So it was fine, but you have to be careful. And I've thought about, there are different times that I've come up with an idea. I've submitted a few times and I'm like, I should just try to do it on my own and self-publish it. But
Mhm.
there's a lot to that. It's a lot of work and it's expensive.
Yeah.
And um, honestly, once you start working in the traditional market, like I've worked with several different publishers, and if you do a good job and you're not a diva and you meet your deadlines and they like you and they like your work and you work hard, they're gonna want you to do other books for them. And
Mhm.
so I want to concentrate more on that. And, of course, branching out to other publishers as well. But just be careful your reasoning for self-publishing. If you're doing it just because you want this book, you want to be able to share this story as a legacy for your family and things, go for it.
Mhm.
Or for example, when I met Dave Burgess, if any of you know him, the Teach Like a Pirate guy, he's awesome. I have presented with him before,
Yeah.
and he, at a dinner for the speakers the night before our presentations, he was asking me, why are you traditionally publishing? You could make so much more per book when you self-publish. But
Mhm.
he was also doing a book for teachers, and that's different. It
Right.
wasn't like a fully illustrated full color thing. And he also is a prolific speaker who speaks a lot, and he was making a lot of money because he could just order thousands of those books and have them on the table to sign at the end of his talks. And he was
Mhm.
giving lots and lots of big talks around the world. So it just depends on your goals. For me right now, I'm very happy doing the traditional publishing route, but I know people that have been very successful in self-publishing.
Yes, and I think it depends very much on what kind of book you're publishing. If you are self-publishing something that has a real niche market, it's easier to reach those readers and it's going to be less appealing to a traditional publisher.
Mhm.
So you may have better success self-publishing. If you're doing a picture book, you have to invest in the great illustrations, which can be very expensive. So
Yeah.
you know. And someone asked about illustrations. If you illustrate your own books, Violet LeMay, who's one of your illustrators,
Yeah.
was our guest last week, and she's on today. I saw her
Oh,
name
awesome. Hi,
said
Violet.
hi to you in the chat box. But you've had some amazing illustrators for your books. You've been really,
Mhm.
really
I've been so
fortunate with that.
fortunate.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Let's see here. So several people have asked about book topics. since you were a teacher, you spend so much time in the classrooms, are there certain topics that you feel are needed, that there's holes that need to be filled?
Gosh, I know that right now, honestly, social and emotional topics are big, but you have to be careful to, and it's hard for me to say don't do it in a didactic way because some of the publishers I work with actually want it to be a little bit didactic because that's what they specialize in, and it's for
Yeah.
like guidance counselors and teachers to launch those discussions. And
Mhm.
but you don't want to hit them over the head with the lesson, of course. But
Mhm.
schools are now requiring social and emotional learning, especially
Oh.
with the pandemic. There is such a great need. So there is that. But if there's a way that you can do it in a way that has humor, in a way that isn't too in your face, about what it is. Um, I think that that is a need, but I think kids right now, at least in my classroom over the last couple of years, have absolutely, I was teaching third grade, so graphic novels were huge. And, that's just one of the things, it didn't matter what the topic was, they would read it because it was a graphic novel. And,
Right.
they just enjoyed that format.
Mhm.
So it's really hard to pinpoint, what it is because there's such a variety out there. But humor seems to be the top of the list for
Mhm.
anything you write. If you can get some humor in there, that will get kids excited about reading it and reading more books in the series or by that same author.
Mhm. Yeah, and especially after the year we've had, I think that kids, we all need funny books. I think
Mhm.
humor across the board is
Yeah.
really important. Let's see. Um, a couple people have asked about promoting during COVID. Now, you talked about doing a lot of virtual visits and being able to be, geographically several places in one week, which is nice
Mhm.
because they were virtual. Did you have to change your program at all as a virtual program versus an in-person program?
Yes. Not, I mean, the whole thing that's different is the vibe, in my opinion. I mean, just, through the screen, you just don't have that same connection. It doesn't
Mhm.
feel like, but I have so many props. I mean, and so I'll show the kids, if I'm presenting for kids, when I'm talking about resilience, I bring out my little Weeble Wobble. And so let me get a hardcover book here. So, when I was a kid, they had Weeble Wobbles. They weeble and they wobble, but they don't fall down. And so when I'm
Right.
talking about resilience, I will show them, see, anytime he gets knocked down, he still gets back up again. And that's what we can do, when we're learning to ride our bike, when we're, trying that hard math problem and it doesn't work out, we can try a new strategy. So I have all kinds of things like that. And so I think if you can keep them engaged with props and, again, humor, things like that, then that's great.
Mhm.
Using breakout groups when you can, sharing your screen and showing funny pictures. So anytime you can get that engagement level up and get them, interacting in some way. One thing that's great
Mhm.
about Zoom, when I've done Zoom visits with kids, is their name is there. And so it's been so neat to be able to say, and, Rhonda, what do you think of that? And,
Yeah.
Jim, what did you think of, when we did this? Or what is your favorite, whatever, and being able to call them by name. I wouldn't be able to do that in person. So that kind of made it a little bit more personal, and the kids enjoy that.
Mhm.
And I've also been able to do, like visits in Australia and India with
Yeah.
kids. And I probably wouldn't be doing that in person right now.
Sure.
So that's been really cool too.
So how do you connect with these opportunities? Do people find you on your website and say, "We want you to present to our school"? Do you send out feelers? How does this work?
Well, it started while I was teaching. I
Mhm.
was the gifted coordinator while I was teaching the last 12 years of being at school. So I started, well, they would always send me to gifted conferences. And
Mhm.
I'm not one to just set and get. I like to participate in some way. So I would always just throw in a submission, not get paid for it or anything, but just say, "Hey, I'm going to be there. So if you want me to talk about perfectionism or how to, have fun writing lessons in your classroom, I'd be happy to do that." And they started taking me up on it. And now this past year, I presented at like over a dozen different state gifted conferences. So that kind of started with that. And then as you speak at conferences for teachers, then and you mention, of course, at the end of your session, I love doing author visits. So if you ever want me to come to your school, please look me up. I'd love to come. Then, I would come home from one of those where I didn't get paid to speak, but I would get an email or two saying, we'd love to have you come to our school and do an author visit. And so, I still do that. Like just today, I was invited to speak at a different gifted conference that a state I haven't done yet. And they said, we're really sorry, we don't pay our speakers. But, and some of those I even have to pay the registration. But they said, but we really want you to come. So if you would be willing, we'll give you the student rate of $25 to come to our conference and speak for us. And so I'm going to do it. I told my daughter about it. She's like, so how much do you get paid for that one? I'm like, no, I have to pay them. And she's like, what? I'm like, well, you don't understand. Like, that's how you make some of these connections. My main audience, some people will spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on Facebook ads and things like that. I haven't done that yet. What I'm more into is, everything costs money or time. And I would rather invest a little more time now that I have a little more time to speak at an event, especially if it's online. It doesn't take that much time. And
Sure.
especially if it's a presentation I already have prepared, then what does it matter if I get on there for an hour of my time with a presentation I've already done multiple times, and I'm connecting with the exact audience that I want to connect with. And so they not only can bring me to their school or have me Zoom in and do a professional development on that topic, but while I'm there, I can do an author visit. And so that just helps in so many ways. And there are many times, as you said, there are a lot of teachers on here. A lot of teachers are interested in writing books because we love books.
Sure.
And so I've had a lot of people end up taking my picture book writing classes because they heard me speak at a teaching conference. It wasn't even a writing conference. So those are some of the biggest ways that I've made connections, is really through the speaking. And
Right.
there are lots of speaking engagements that pay. And thankfully, I've been getting more and more of those and less of the, well, you have to pay to go to our conference. But even while you're there, think about this. This is very humbling. But, when you are at a conference and you're speaking alongside some of these people that are definitely getting paid, the participants don't know that. I mean, honestly, before I started speaking, I had no clue that some of these people were paying to come. I just assumed everyone was paid and everyone was revered. And, these are these awesome people that everyone invites to their conferences. And it's not necessarily the case. So if you're speaking somewhere for free or even having to pay a little bit, the participants are seeing you as an expert on the topic or whatever it is. And that helps you to get those connections to do further speaking.
That is great. That is great advice. And it makes you feel better about being there for free. You don't feel like you're being taken advantage of because you have this long view of how this is going to benefit you down the road. Yeah.
Yeah. The other connection that I make, and especially these virtual ones, it's funny because they would have like these virtual meeting rooms, and social hours and things. And there would be sometimes rooms just for the speakers to kind of hang out. And I can't tell you how many podcast interviews I ended up getting because I was just chatting with other speakers and we're like, well, what do you do? Well, what do you, and they'd be like, will you come on my podcast next week? Will you, and that's another tip for everyone is podcasts, because think about people that do podcasts, they need content.
Yes.
So it's not a paid thing, but think about what you're doing, especially if it's a podcast for teachers or for parents or for other authors or someone in the writing business. If you're doing a podcast interview and, they're asking you questions about your books and they're asking questions about, what you do, what you know about and care about, then that's also spreading the word for free. And, you're helping them because they know you're going to share the podcast interview and they're helping you because they're going to share it all over. And that's content that's kind of evergreen now, because for as long as they have that podcast, people can go back to those episodes, much like this on Children's Book Insider. Laura posts the recordings afterward, and then you have access to all of the past ones. So I know there are many times that I can't make it the actual live social distancing hour. But
Right.
as soon as she sends that recording, I star that so I know I can come back to it and watch it later. So
Mhm.
anytime you have an opportunity like that, I was thrilled when Laura asked, would you like to do a social distancing hour? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to do that.
That's great. Well, we're so happy you said yes. Last question here, then I'll let you go. There's a lot of people who want to, talk to you all night. No, you know, that's not surprising to me. So several people on here have said, I'm a teacher, I'm taking a sabbatical next year. I'm taking leave of absence from my job, and I'm going to just have a year to really focus on seeing if I can make this work. What would be your advice on sort of their starting point? Would it be to create an Ikigai board? Would it be to sort of, would that help shape a plan for their year? Do you think it's important that they have a plan, is what I'm
Yes.
saying? Mm.
Yes. So, and it doesn't have to be Ikigai. Mine
Yeah.
started out as a few years ago, I made something that was just called Big Dreams. And that was
Yeah.
it. It was a vision board. And some of the things I've checked off and some of them I still haven't yet. But this, when I heard about the Ikigai thing, I was like, oh, this is so cool. And
Yeah.
this really, works as far as, like what we should be focusing on. And so that would be a great starting point. But the other thing is, for me anyway, I love learning. And so one of the things that has helped me is like, I am taking classes right now. I'm
Mhm.
taking author business classes, and I'm also taking other writing classes because, just because you get books published doesn't mean you're done. You can
Right.
always improve. I mean, that's, I guess, that growth mindset part of me. You can always get better. And so one of my reasons for taking the sabbatical was to study my craft and to learn more about the business side so I can be successful and not stressed out or worried, and always be in scarcity mindset instead of abundance mindset. And so any chance you get to be able to learn more, I think that helps. You have to be careful because I have caught myself sometimes taking in so many webinars and classes that then the day's gone before I know it and my brain is full and happy. But like, you have to also apply those things you're
Do.
learning.
Yeah.
And but anytime that you can be learning, and what I've learned as a teacher in my own professional development is kids learn best and people in general learn best from someone who is a little further along the path than you are. So
Mhm.
for me to, learn from J.K. Rowling, it's not as realistic as me learning from someone that is, like just a little further down the path than me, that
Right.
maybe has 50 books published and some of them are, New York Times bestsellers. That would be awesome for me to learn from someone like that. And so if you can find someone that's a little further along than the way than you, then that's a great way. Or if you can find someone to mentor you,
Mhm.
that's a great thing to do too when you're first getting started.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think it's important that you be willing to invest in these learning opportunities, and not expect people to just mentor you for free, or sign up just for free classes, but be able to say, if I'm going to learn, I'm going to have to be willing to pay a bit for the right kind of instruction.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Mhm.
that's so hard
It
because,
is.
I've had so many people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I've got this book idea. Will you help me get it published?" And I'm like, "Do you know how many years it took me to learn how to do that?"
Exactly.
Like, it's not just an afternoon of you and I sitting down and chatting about, oh, who will call and
Mhm.
they'll publish it. It doesn't work that way. And so that was why I started doing full day picture book classes. And my
Mhm.
first one was in person. It was awesome. I had such a great time. And it was a full day, like from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. And we did all picture book, just the craft of writing picture books.
Yep.
And then I offered one on, the next steps for your story. And the reason I started offering those, I was offering them to people that I knew because there were so many of them like coming out of the woodwork that I was like, okay, I can't possibly help everyone unless I can group them together and
Mhm.
maybe do it that way. And that's why I'm working right now on launching some online courses, because as I look at my schedule and as it fills up with some of these opportunities I was saying, that just have bubbled up that weren't on my radar, but that are good opportunities and they do fit with my goals.
Mhm.
I'm running out of the time to have Saturdays free to do these full day workshops. And so I thought, well, instead, I'll take all of the content from those and I will offer them online. And not only is that better for me because I'm not doing them on multiple Saturdays, but the people watching them can pause them whenever they want.
Sure.
They can watch them as many times as they want. They can, go in whatever order they want, and that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on. It launches June 27th. So I have all the
Great.
content. It's just a matter of doing the recordings, and
Mhm.
then it will be there, and that will, I think, help a lot. But yeah, I mean, you have to, even though I'm not a paid teacher anymore. I invested in a $600 class this year because I knew it was good and I knew it was
Mhm.
going to move me in the right direction.
Mm.
I mentioned a virtual assistant. I was thinking, I can't afford that. Well, I got creative. And what I did was I hired a virtual assistant that is doing author visit bookings for me on a percentage. So she's basically like a booking agent. So anytime
Right.
she gets me a school gig, she gets a percentage of that. And so we have
Mhm.
that all worked out. And, that will help me get to my goal that's on my board of 50 visits a year or more.
Mhm.
And so that was just one step I took. And even though it's taking away some of my income, it's worth it to me because,
Sure.
again, everything takes time or money. It's going to
Mhm.
take a little less of my time and a little bit of my money. And it all balances out and works out in the end.
Mhm. Terrific. Terrific. It sounds awesome. Well, thank you, Shannon. This has been amazing, and we could continue for hours, but we don't want to keep you here all night. And thank you so much for all the information, for your enthusiasm, your inspiration. People have loved it, and we are all going to go forth and have an abundance mindset and
Yes,
accomplish things. So, thank you so much.
I hope so. Well,
Yeah.
thanks so much for inviting me on here. I really enjoyed it, and I'm trying to see all the chats here. I'm going to save the chat so I can um, get to read through those.
Hmm. I will send it to you so you can see it
Okay.
all. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being here tonight, and we will see you next week. Have a great Memorial Day, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Good night, everybody.